Hi, everyone. Nicola Hamilton, president of RGD, back to have another discussion about what it's like to practice design in different regions across the country. This time I'm joined from a few folks who are practicing from the prairies. So I might ask you both to introduce yourselves. Hannah, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm Hannah Wheeler, and I'm the co-founder of Zap Branding. Zap is a strategic branding agency focused on brand creation, rebranding, and brand transformations. We are working with innovative companies, and so we do workshops designed for clients and train in-house how to do marketing and design. We're also training agencies on how to do branding. So that's our newest thing. Is we just love to help agencies grow.
Nice, amazing. And Hannah, where exactly are you calling in from today?
We're from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
Amazing. Andrea, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and where you're zoomed in from?
Sure. My name is Andrea Tatro. I'm one of the partners here at Tatro Design. So I am one of the two Tatros. The other is Paul, who's my partner in business and also my husband. We've been in business for 25 years and married for about the same amount of time as well. And we have a small to medium-sized shop here in downtown Winnipeg, just on the edge of the historic Winnipeg Exchange District. So we are a graphic design branding agency here, and we do a lot of branding work, but we also do a lot of just communications and web development, web design. And it's been a 25-year kind of road, so it's really kind of changed over the years, obviously from moving from print design into the digital world has been a huge change for us over the last 25 years. So now we're pretty general in terms of the design and communications work we do, but it's, I think, primarily in the brand and web sort of sphere now.
Amazing. And how big is your team?
We've got, let's see, six full-time in studio, one part-time, and then two remote workers. We've got one developer that works with us actually out of Mexico in the winter, which is, when you're a Winnipegger, is probably not a bad idea. And then we've got another designer who works for us half-time out of Gimli, Manitoba, which is about an hour outside of the city.
Nice. So that's
10 in
10 total?
Yeah.
10-ish.
10-ish.
Hannah,
Yeah.
what about you? How big is the team at Zap?
We have 5 full-time.
Okay,
and
amazing.
Then we pull in motion designers if we need.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I want to start by just sort of talking about getting an idea of what practicing design in both Saskatoon and Winnipeg looks like. Hannah, do you want to tell us a little bit about the design scene in Saskatoon?
Sure. It's exciting here with the tight-knit group. So everyone is very tight-knit, everyone knows each other. So there's only a few kind of major agencies here. And so everyone's kind of worked in each of them. And if there's new designers that come, it's very exciting. It's still competitive to get jobs because a lot of our designers come from Vancouver or Calgary mostly. And so when they do come, they decide to come and move to Saskatoon because it's a little bit cheaper to live here. So that brings some designers from those cities as well, but it's tight knit.
And when you say it's still competitive, is it competitive just because there aren't so many agencies, which means there aren't so many jobs?
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of agencies, they kind of, I guess one person gets hired and then they kind of almost like not poach the others, but if someone's ready for a change, then they'll go to a new agency. And so then that position isn't really open. They're just kind of transferring seats in a way. So not as much opening up new seats for design, but it does happen now that we're growing as a city.
Yeah. Does it feel like the design scene is growing in Saskatoon in a growth phase?
It is. We're kind of called the Silicon Prairie is what we've been naming it as. So we're in the hub of innovation place. And so it's in the University of Saskatchewan. And so we have an office there, it's co-working, and it's all the tech hub of Saskatoon and kind of people coming from all around for that space. So I know that there's a lot of developers that are in that space and a lot more tech focused. So it's growing. A lot of graphic design jobs in the tech field have been going there too. So
yeah, that's so interesting. Andrea, what about Winnipeg? What's it What's the scene like in Winnipeg?
Well, it's interesting because it's yeah, almost the opposite of what Hannah said. You know, there's I'd say there's a lot of sort of new firms that have opened up, a lot of mergers, a lot of movement. We've got 2 design schools here. So we've got Red River College that's got a graphic design program that graduates, I think, around 40 people a year. We've also got a graphic design department at the University of Manitoba. So plus, you know, all of the technical schools and stuff, putting out developers and communication specialists and so on. So there's a lot of people being put out. And in spite of that, it's really been quite difficult actually to fill positions. There's a couple of big players that have come onto the scene. Skip the Dishes being one has a big, I believe it's their headquarters is here. So they hire hundreds of people a year, and a lot of those are designers. So if you go to the like, you know, the open houses at the end of the year for the schools, they've got people there that are recruiting, you know, as many designers as they can get their hands on. So it's been quite difficult actually to get people, which is why we're sort of working with you know, some remote help when we need it. You know, rather than kind of hiring people that aren't the right fit, just kind of, you have to kind of wait and be patient for those people to become available, or invest in getting somebody right out of school and then kind of put that time into you know, to train them and to get them, you know, kind of to the point where they're ready to be self-sufficient and so on.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of in-house design teams in Winnipeg, like Skip the Dishes?
There is some, definitely. Like usually for as soon as you get to like sort of a mid-size organization, whether, you know, regardless of the sector, I think that there's a real desire for a lot of organizations to have in-house people. And it's interesting, like one thing that we've really noticed is a lot of organizations trying to, or putting out ads for somebody who is like their social media writer, videographer, designer, you know, like
the unicorn.
all the things. And, you know, so they get these people out of like these creative communication courses, and, you know, they're juniors, so they're getting not paid a ton, but they're being asked to do all of these things, which is, you know, I think a little unrealistic. And, you know, and unfortunately it does sort of chip away at the agency work, because, you know, if somebody has somebody on staff, they're certainly not going to be outsourcing for design help. I mean, it's less of an issue for us. I mean, we're not, you know, we're not going to be fighting over like, you know, kind of, you know, doing, you know, little social media posts and, you know, the day-to-day stuff. What we tend to do is the bigger branding projects and campaign work and that kind of stuff, which, you know, somebody in that position wouldn't be tasked with. So, but you know, certainly I think for independence and stuff like that, that would take a bite out of that kind of work. So yeah, that's definitely a thing here for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hannah, you mentioned that there isn't actually a design school in our pre-conversation here. You mentioned that there isn't actually a design school in Saskatoon. And how does that affect the industry there?
I would say out of school, we don't have a lot of quality coming out. So a lot of them, they're not ready to come into an agency or a design studio. And so that's been the challenge, is that because it's a year diploma or something like that coming out, that it's not a 4-year program where they've had a lot of that experience. So that would be the biggest challenge, is hiring here locally, unless they've come back from Vancouver or Calgary.
Right. So pipeline's a challenge. Hiring junior talent is tough.
Yeah. And so we actually started training. So that's how we started why we started training. We started training designers in-house. So even Andrea was mentioning that they're kind of unicorns working in-house. We actually go in and we train them how to have these kind of design skills and marketing hybrid skills. And then a lot of times when we're in there, we kind of talk to those leadership teams and they say, we really need a campaign or something. And then we can then bring that out to other agencies in Saskatoon.
That's so interesting. In some of the other regions, we were chatting a little bit about design literacy and about how in cities or towns where design doesn't have as deep a history as maybe some of our urban centers, that the sort of education piece is something that studio and agency owners are doing often, educating their clients in the value of design. Yeah, you're nodding. Does that feel like something that you're doing a lot of?
For us, all the time. So I run training programs for all different sizes of companies. And that just because there's not a lot of education of why do I need a rebrand. Even the competition now is starting to get deeper because a lot of our clients are competing on a global stage. And so they realize once they go global that they're like, wow, I need a brand to compete in the market. So then they're like, oh, I need a brand. But before then, they don't know they need a brand.
Yeah, I mean, especially in a saturated industry like technology, right? Where there's just an app for everything.
Even
Or two.
agriculture.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Is there a lot of agricultural work in Saskatoon?
Yes, lots. Yeah, I would say about 80% is agriculture for us.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about the sectors where there is lots of design work in the regions that you're in. So lots of tech and agriculture in Saskatoon. Are there other sectors where there's tons of design work? Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Andrea, what about for you in Winnipeg? What are the sectors that sort of have the most appetite for design work?
Well, it's interesting because I think Winnipeg is one of those places that really just doesn't have like a sector. Like it's really, really broad. You know, and our studio over the years have had like moments of like, oh, I guess we're the theater people, or I guess we're the healthcare people, because, you know, we were talking earlier about like that word of mouth. So, you know, you do work for you know, a theater company, and that artistic director moves to another theater, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, you should come and work for us. And then, you know, that you end up, you know, suddenly before you know it, you've got 4 theaters that you're doing work for. But that has really kind of like, it continues to morph and change. But I think generally in Winnipeg, it's pretty diverse. So like, I mean, we do work in healthcare, not-for-profit, arts, government, ag, you know, private businesses, retail. I mean, you name it. It's like it's really, really broad. Yeah, it would be. I know that there are, you know, and I don't think there are many agencies here that specialize, because you just can't. Like, I think there's 1 or 2 that maybe have more of an ag focus. But, you know, they're probably big enough that like we literally do very little to no ag. Like we're in the middle of the prairies, so, which is kind of funny. Yeah, we do way more arts than ag.
That is funny. I mean, it's interesting to think about. And then I'm also curious about how much of the work you do is based in the region versus how much of it is outside of the region.
Yeah, for us, I would say it's maybe 60-40. So 60 is local and 40 is not. And of that, like we have 1 international client, and then the rest would be like local or like sort of national, like Canadian companies.
Yeah, it's just interesting to think about sort of region to region. Hannah, what about you? How much is local?
I'd say about 70% is local for us, and the rest, we have an international client, and then we've got national, mostly Western Canada.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the pros and cons of working in the regions that you're in. So what are some of the sort of magical elements of where you are, and what are some of the obstacles or things that you hope might shift or change in the coming years?
Anna, you want to give her?
Well, I would say our region, it's exciting, I would say at this moment in time, because a lot of our things that come to us trends wise, things like that, are about 5 years behind, I would say, the rest of Canada, sometimes it feels like. And so now I feel everyone's kind of catching up to the digital trend. And so everyone's very excited since COVID. Now, a lot of people have kind of stopped the only traditional ways of marketing and design and brought it into the digital space. So I think it's like everyone's excited. I would say it would be our where we are right now.
Yeah. What about you, Andrea? What's exciting in Winnipeg right now? What's one of the best parts of working in that region?
Well, just sort of seeing how things are kind of settling in after COVID is an interesting kind of dynamic, just to see how that and not only for us and other agencies, but also for clients as well. Like Hannah mentioned, I think that there is a big move to for companies realizing that, you know, they really need to, you know, get some rubber on the road, like that they just can't sit back and expect people are going to come to them, that they have to have some sort of a unique offering. And in many cases that is brand. and looking at other ways beyond, like a newspaper ad to figure out how to connect with your audience. People are just realizing, I think, the power of the digital media and digital communications, and just how quickly that's changing. And I think that's one of the challenges, and it's certainly probably not just for us, but I'm sure we've all done, like digital campaigns, and like, you shoot off the files and 5 minutes later you find out that all the sizes have changed because Facebook has like completely changed the ad proportion. So like to try and stay on top of things, and what's depending on what age group you're talking to, suddenly it's very segmented too. If you're, doing a campaign for this generation or that generation, suddenly your output methods are completely different. I mean, not that that's new in design or advertising, but I feel like it's just that much more pronounced now, that you really just have to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening. I mean, and then I think also there is, maybe it's the opposite of democratization, where design is now just that much more valued and more accessible, but not in the way that it used to be, that you would think, okay, well, anybody who has a computer can be a designer. It's more like, okay, we need design now to differentiate ourselves, like, because before, in especially in small centers like Winnipeg or Saskatoon, where you don't have that big global influence, at least back in the day. I mean, it didn't, the work was probably more conservative, clients were probably, not as, or much more like risk adverse. But now, because they see everything, I think it's put a fire under them, that it's like, okay, like, that they're pushing us, like, like what can you do? And that's pretty exciting as a designer from a place that's traditionally sort of more kind of risk adverse and conservative.
I think that just globalization in general is a part of that too, right? So many products and services that launch in smaller centers go on to have national at least, or international reach, right? And that requires so much more design thinking than something that's localized.
Well, yeah, we had a client just recently, she got a call, the Grammys wanted to put her product in the grab bags, and and she's this, she's got this great company, this great product, but they found her like through the internet, and and suddenly, like, she's on the map. She's at the Grammys, and that's and that's just never would have happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Well, and the rollout of that is bananas, right? You need to be prepared to put your product in those grab bags at the Grammys, but then you also need to be prepared for what happens after that, right? How do you then scale if there is interest after a big event like that? And then, that's why we brand, so that you can scale up as things change. You have a solid foundation.
For sure.
I'm curious what changes you've seen in your region over the last few years. So it might be pandemic related, but it might also be sort of more historic than that. Hannah, how long have you been back in Saskatoon?
I've been here since 2013. So
okay.
Yeah,
10 years.
10 years. Yeah. So I started Zap about 10 years ago. So since then it's changed a lot.
Okay, tell us a bit about that. So, I mean, you talked about the sort of bubbling tech sector for sure. Are there other things that have changed?
I would say even just the way that people think, like their mentality. Before, I've noticed anyways with other clients, I worked in agencies when I was here as an art director, and I also had Zap on the side. So I did that for a few years as I was running my studio. So it was a lot of work back then. But I noticed with people just didn't know what they needed, where now I find they have this idea. At least I want to be on social media. I want to be in these areas, where before, when I was working in those kind of advertising sectors, they would just be like, I trust you, just do whatever you want to do and tell me how much it's going to cost. Where now we find people are using the canvas to design, trying to do things themselves and realizing it's not working. And then they come to us. So we found just the way that people are trying to do their own logo, their own thing, and then realizing that they really do need a design studio. I found that's changed a lot, where people before, there's no way they could design their own logo. but now you can go on Canva. So that's a big,
I think
big
I think technology plays a part of that, but I think it's also, to Andrea's earlier point, like part of that sort of after effect of everybody thinking anyone with a computer can design, right? It's like the tail end of that, hopefully.
They realize though. So there's
Yeah.
a realization. Sometimes they just have to try it, and then they realize after. You hope that they don't have to go through that process, but a lot of them end up doing that anyways.
Yeah.
But it depends on the size of company.
Andrea, what about for you? What's changed in Winnipeg?
Yeah, well, I would certainly echo a lot of the same things that Hannah had said, where so I don't know that it's unique to Winnipeg, but now having to equip clients with tools so that they can do all the things that they would need to do in their day-to-day stuff without wrecking the brand. So, giving them assets for Canva and that kind of stuff, and building websites that they can maintain. One big change that, like there was the remote work thing that we've talked about before, and that was, I think, a result of COVID for sure. We see a lot of remote or hybrid workspaces now coming into play. People are starting to talk about 4-day work week. So there's lots of movement in that direction, I think, particularly because, like I mentioned before, it's been very, very difficult for people to get skilled workers. So that gives, of course, the employee population like a lot of power and a lot of a bigger voice, I think, because it's like, okay, well, how can we as employers make this good for you, make it work for you, without having it be bad for us. So I think that there's been a lot of movement in that. In that degree, and then it just sort of in a broader sense, I think there's been a lot of as a result of COVID, I think a lot of people just left their jobs. So there's a lot of independents out there that are working, like individuals just working out of their homes. There's lots and lots of them. And I think that's also created a really interesting collaboration network between individuals of with different strengths. I mean, certainly for us, like we're reaching out to people we know are like, you're a great illustrator, or you have this particular skill or whatever, or you're really good in this particular sector or something like that. So being able to kind of customize your team based on some of the, like on outsourcing, some of these folks that are working individually, and they work amongst themselves as well, whether it's like through artist cooperatives and that sort of thing. So that's been a big change, I think, in the last few years.
Was there a big freelance network in Winnipeg before the pandemic, or has that been a sort of pandemic shift?
I think that's been a pandemic shift. Like there was some, certainly, but and it would kind of ebb and flow, because I think that lots of people will like kind of work on their own for a while. For some it sticks. For others it's like, I don't like having to chase after clients. I don't like having to do the books. Like, I just want to do the work. And then for other folks, they just really love the autonomy of working on their own. But yeah, I didn't really notice like a ton of them pre-pandemic, honestly. We were probably less likely to hire them as well, because that that does make things a little more complicated in terms of billing and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that has been a big change.
Yeah, so interesting. I want to talk a little bit about the future and sort of what you hope to see. So we talked about things that have maybe changed. Are there trends you're seeing that you hope keep up their momentum? Are there other things that maybe haven't been addressed as obstacles yet that you hope shift in the nearish future? Hannah, what comes to mind?
Like with obstacles, like things that are
or just trends that might have already picked up that you hope have momentum, maintain their momentum, or things that you think need some attention from the design community in Saskatoon.
I think for me anyways, I'm very excited about the in-house teams. A lot of bigger companies are hiring those in-house teams of designers. And so I get excited about how to nurture those design teams that don't maybe have a person who's design focused or a creative director in-house. So I would say they have a VP of marketing or marketing manager, but the marketing manager doesn't have design experience. And so I feel for all those designers because
Yeah.
they kind of miss that connection. So I get excited about that. I would say as a opportunity and as well the challenge
Yeah.
for the designers inside of those big companies.
I think that was such an interesting change that happened in Toronto, maybe 7 to 10 years ago. This sort of shift to in-house, which is now such a huge part of Ontario's design business. Our in-house teams, and yeah, they started as one person toiling away on design without anyone to sort of feed off of, and now they're bigger teams. So yeah, that would be very cool to see pop up across Saskatchewan.
Yeah, it'd be awesome to
Yeah.
have even those remote creative directors that come in, even as consultants, just to help those amazing design teams internally.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrea, what about for you? What are you hoping Winnipeg puts some energy into in the near future?
Well, I think that, just, I've just, and again, maybe it's been just us, maybe not being as engaged, but I'd love to see the community, sort of start to come together to communicate, in some sort of way, because I think that, like I talked about, there's been a lot of like sort of these new collaborations that I see as being such a positive, amazing thing. I think that people are just learning so much from each other, that I'd love to see that even go further, because some of the bad things about this sort of segmentation of the design community has also meant some not great things, like this like undercutting, because there's so much competition for the work that's out there, or you've got people who are working who maybe don't have a lot of experience in things like pricing and business, and that kind of hurts everybody. So
Yeah.
having social interaction with kind of like people who are new to the industry or new to business, and being able to provide some sort of mentorship, and collaboration and sharing of knowledge, talking like this about the challenges that we all face, and being able to speak frankly without everybody having to hold their cards like so close to the vest.
I'm so curious about how close folks hold the cards to the vest. And I know that it's like such a difficult thing to generalize about, but in our sort of GTA conversation, which is where I'm based, we talked a little bit about the ways in which I remember starting out in this industry and folks were not willing to share business knowledge specifically or tell you what kinds of projects they were pitching on or working on. You'd often be pitching against your friends and you'd never acknowledge it, which was always fascinating. And I've seen that shift a little bit. And I'm curious sort of where on that spectrum of transparency and secrecy are your regions hanging out?
Ours are very secretive.
Okay.
I would say nobody, it's very much not community over competition. It's very much a competitive town.
Yeah.
And so even I talk to other agencies and I tell them we teach agencies how to do branding. That's what we do for clients. Like we teach you how to do our secrets in our agency and what we've done for branding for 10 years. And a lot of agencies are kind of scared, like, oh my gosh, like you're actually going to train me on if I trust you, because it's so secretive of a process. So I find that really, really interesting.
Yeah, me too. And I'm always curious, I don't know if I know definitively, is that a scarcity mindset thing? Is that a just age of industry in a city? Is that a community thing, that sort of the closer knit the community becomes, the more they're willing to talk about it?
It's like a mindset for us anyways. It's a scarcity, that there's not going to be enough work and I can't share the work because I have to feed my staff, my family. So it's definitely a mindset here.
Andrea, what about for you?
Yeah, I think it's always been that way. And I don't know, maybe it is just like, going way back into time. That's just, business is competition, and kill the weak, whatever. Like, I don't know where it comes from, like cavemen, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's always been like that. It's and it's hard to get past it. And I think, like, I remember back in the like, early, like mid 90s, like I noticed such a shift when I was working in Toronto. It was like cutthroat, like, people would like totally kill each other to like, like doing spec work, whatever it took to get that client.
Yeah.
That's what we did. And then when I moved to Winnipeg, and like I'm like, what do you mean we're going for drinks with like the competition? Like, that's insane. Like, who are you people? And it was great, because I mean, we were able to sort of separate those things. I mean, we didn't necessarily put all the cards on the table, but we all knew that we were kind of working to the same goal. And if you were doing the work for half price, then how's that going to work out? And it just hurt everybody. So I think people just kind of had an understanding, and there was also like kind of, I mean, it's an outdated term, but this gentleman's agreement of who my clients are, I know who your clients are, and we'll stay on our sides of the fence, and that's all good. You had situations like if a client of a competitor that was also a friend came to us, it'd be like, oh, well, why are you leaving them? And like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Like, and what did they do something wrong? Like, and then we would get on the phone and be like, oh, your client called me, and like, maybe you should talk to them and patch things over or whatever. Like, so it was a very different kind of environment, but that's, definitely changed, with the distance. And but I think, you get people sitting across the table from each other, and those barriers really come down, because it's the fear of the unknown, right? It's really easy to distrust or dislike somebody if you're not, kind of face to face with them.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that anything that is good for one business is good for another business, and I think if we can, and that's where all of the the GDC and the RGD, that's what it's all about, right? That community, and together we're stronger. If we act as professionals, and we act as a professional community that all has the same values and ethics and policies and pricing, and I mean, within reason, of course, but that it's a much more respectable kind of profession, and then becomes more valuable and more respected. So I think it's good for everybody to kind of keep that
I agree.
communication open.
I agree. Okay, we are running out of time, but I want to wrap this up with just a little bit of advice for the folks watching. They might be students looking to find a place to land, but we might also have folks in the audience who are looking to branch out and start their own design business. So I'll let you choose who you want to give advice to, but I'm curious what kind of advice you might have to share.
I would say for us, making sure that you don't let the doubt get in the way. So a lot of times when you have an amazing idea, or you have this vision for what you want to do, it could be to be in a in-house space, whatever that vision is, start a company, but to go for your dreams and stay focused. So I know with designers and visionaries, they like to think about all these ideas. So they'll start an agency, and then they'll start another company, and they'll do something else. So I would say staying focused and doing one thing at a time is what we've seen to be the most successful and most enjoyable of a process as well.
I feel like that's just good life advice in general.
It is, but it's something we see all the time.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest advice.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Andrea, what about you?
Well, I mentor students at the college here, the design students, and I always try and encourage them. I mean, even if their dream is to start their own shop, and by all means, I like to encourage them to do that, but to at least spend the first couple of years of your career actually working with others, because I think that it's school takes you to this point, and then like working for others, I think it's just exponential. Like, you learn so much working in an environment with others, that that's really kind of the continuation of your education that I think is really necessary before going out on your own. So that's something that I ideally that's what I would recommend if it if circumstances allow.
Absolutely. I think also it's a great experience to see how someone else runs their design business before you figure out what fits you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, thank you both for joining me from very different parts of the country. I actually don't know how many hours are between the two of you.
between Saskatoon and about 6
Yeah.
hours, I'd say. Hey?
6.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
so.
between,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you both for joining us, for giving us a peek into your spaces, and for giving us a little bit of wisdom, sharing your experiences from where you operate out of. It was such a pleasure. Thank
Our
you.
pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everyone.